I knew my marriage was over the moment I caught the scent. A woody, masculine cologne that clung to my wife's skin like an invisible brand of betrayal. Standing in our bedroom doorway, I watched Melissa hastily button her blouse, her back to me, unaware of my presence. 5 years of marriage, and it had come to this moment. This silent, devastating moment that would change everything. I made dinner, I said quietly, my voice steadier than I expected. Truffle pasta, your favorite. She turned, startled, her amber eyes widening just slightly before narrowing again. No guilt there, just irritation at being caught. Donald, I didn't hear you come in. She ran a hand through her disheveled chestnut hair. I'm tired. I need to shower. I took a step toward her, one simple, hopeful step. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe this wasn't what it seemed. Don't touch me, Donald, she said coldly, backing away as if I were a stranger. I said I'm tired. 5 words that shattered my world. 5 words that confirmed everything I'd been trying not to see. I could have shouted, could have demanded answers, could have thrown things and made accusations. Instead, I looked at her, really looked at her, memorizing the face of the woman I thought I knew. Then I turned and walked away without saying another word. That was 6 months ago. Now I stand at the window of my downtown penthouse, looking out at the city lights reflecting in the harbor. My phone buzzes on the glass desk behind me. Melissa's name appears on the screen for the 5th time today. I let it go to voicemail, just like the other 4 calls, just like the dozen calls last week, just like the emails and texts that have been flooding in since she discovered what I'd done. She wants to talk, says she made a terrible mistake, says she regrets everything. But I learned long ago that actions speak louder than words, and my actions over the past 6 months have spoken volumes. I met Melissa Robertson at a tech startup conference in Portland 5 years ago. I was presenting a paper on supply chain optimization algorithms. Dry stuff to most people, but revolutionary in certain business circles. She was in marketing for Technova, one of those flashy startups with free kombucha on tap and beanbag chairs in conference rooms. The kind that burns through venture capital like kindling and disappears within 18 months. After my presentation, most people asked routine questions about implementation costs or scalability. Not Melissa. She approached me with a half smile and perfect posture, hand extended. Your algorithm could revolutionize mid-market manufacturing, but your presentation made it sound about as exciting as watching paint dry, she said, her amber eyes meeting mine directly. You need better messaging if you want companies to actually adopt it. I should have been offended. Instead, I found myself smiling back. And I suppose you're the person to provide that messaging. I could be. She shrugged one elegant shoulder. Over dinner, perhaps. We were married 6 months later. Some people said it was too fast. My brother Jack warned me that I hardly knew her. But when you know, or at least I thought I did. Her brilliance complemented my technical mind. Her ease with people balanced my introversion. Together, we seemed unstoppable. 1 year into our marriage, we founded Apex Solutions. The business model was simple. I developed supply chain optimization software targeted at mid-sized manufacturers, and Melissa transformed complex technical concepts into compelling marketing narratives that business owners could understand. Our first office was the converted garage of our modest Portland bungalow. Our first client was a local furniture manufacturer who took a chance on us based on Melissa's persuasive pitch. Within 3 years, we had 70 employees, a downtown office with a view of Mount Hood, and a client list that included some of the largest regional manufacturers. We bought a house in West Hills where doctors and tech executives lived. I drove a practical Tesla Model 3. Melissa chose a Range Rover. In the third bay of our garage sat my weekend project, a 1968 Mustang I was slowly restoring. Success came so quickly that sometimes I'd wake up at night, wondering if it was all a dream. Melissa would curl against me in our California king bed, her breathing soft and even, and I'd think, this is what happiness feels like. This is what winning at life feels like. I was a fool. The first changes were so subtle I barely noticed them. Melissa began working later, claiming meetings with potential clients ran long. Our dinner conversations, once filled with excited planning for Apex's future, became briefer, more perfunctory. She started taking business trips to Seattle and San Francisco, trips I wasn't invited to join. It's just meetings with marketing firms, she'd say, packing designer outfits into her Louis Vuitton suitcase. You'd be bored to tears. Maybe I should have questioned it then, but I was busy too, developing a new module for our software suite that would potentially double our client base. And I trusted her. Completely. Unquestioningly. The way you're supposed to trust your wife, your business partner, your best friend. The biggest opportunity of our company's history came in the form of Westridge Manufacturing, a regional powerhouse with 15 locations across the Pacific Northwest. Landing them as a client would transform Apex from successful startup to established industry player. Melissa took the lead on the negotiations, working closely with their new COO, James Carson. Carson was everything I wasn't: tall, conventionally handsome, with the smooth confidence that comes from an Ivy League education and a career built on connections rather than actual accomplishments. He'd come to Westridge from McKinsey & Company, bringing with him a reputation as a turnaround specialist and cost-cutting expert. The first time I met him, at a preliminary meeting in our offices, I noticed how his eyes lingered on Melissa a beat too long. I noticed how she smiled just a little more brightly when he spoke. But I dismissed these observations as paranoia. Melissa was naturally charming with everyone. It was part of what made her so effective in her role. James thinks we can finalize the contract by the end of the month, she told me one evening, her face illuminated by her laptop screen as we sat in our home office. He's convinced the CEO that our system will reduce their logistics costs by at least 22%. That's fantastic, I replied, looking up from my own computer. We should celebrate this weekend. Maybe drive down to that winery in Willamette Valley you like. She didn't look up. I can't this weekend. I have to meet with James and their technical team in Seattle. Their IT director has concerns about integration with their existing systems. I could come along, I offered. Integration questions are more my department anyway. She finally glanced up, her expression unreadable. No need, I've got it handled. Besides, don't you have that module to finish? I did, so I let it go. The night everything changed, the night of the clone and the cold words, I had come home early. The module was complete, testing beautifully. I'd stopped at Pasta Works for fresh ingredients, then at Vinopolis for a bottle of the Barolo we'd brought back from our anniversary trip to Italy the previous year. I prepared her favorite pasta with black truffles, set the dining room table with the Wedgwood china we rarely used, and waited, and waited, and waited. Her text came at 8:15 p.m. Meeting running late, don't wait up. But I did wait, and when she finally came home at 9:30, it wasn't from any meeting. The smudged lipstick, the misaligned buttons, the unfamiliar cologne, they told a different story entirely. After she rebuffed me with those 5 devastating words, I spent the night on the sofa in my home office, staring at the ceiling, calculating my next move with the same methodical precision I applied to software development. By morning, I had a plan. Not to save my marriage, that ship had sailed the moment I smelled another man's cologne on my wife. No, this was a plan to protect what I'd built, what I'd worked for, what was rightfully mine. The next day, I didn't confront Melissa. I didn't demand explanations or apologies. Instead, I smiled over breakfast, accepted her flimsy excuse about being exhausted the night before, and kissed her cheek as if nothing had happened. Have a great day, honey, I said as she left for the office. I'll be working from home today, finalizing some details on the module. As soon as her Range Rover disappeared down our tree-lined street, I went to work. First, I pulled up her calendar, which I had access to as company co-founder. The supposed meeting with Westridge had ended at 5:30 p.m. according to the schedule. Where had she been for the next 4 hours? I checked our company credit card statements. No restaurant charges, no hotel rooms, nothing unusual at all. Next, I reviewed recent emails between Melissa and James Carson. Most were professional, discussing contract terms and implementation timelines. But there were occasional phrases that seemed oddly personal, inside jokes I wasn't privy to. Nothing explicitly inappropriate, but enough to reinforce my suspicions. The final confirmation came when I checked our cell phone records. Dozens of calls to and from the same number. Carson's personal cell, not his office line. many late at night or on weekends, some lasting over an hour. I sat back in my ergonomic desk chair, a strange calm settling over me. Now I knew. Now I could act. I called Marcus Gentry, a corporate attorney I'd met through our neighborhood golf club. We arranged to meet that afternoon at a coffee shop in Lake Oswego, far from our usual business circles. I need to restructure my company, I told him after we'd exchanged pleasantries. Completely legally, but with maximum protection for certain assets. Marcus studied me over his espresso, his gray eyebrows lifting slightly. Problems with a business partner? Let's call it prudent planning for potential contingencies, I replied evenly. What can be done without requiring a co-owner's signature? He didn't push for details, which is why I'd chosen him. Marcus was discreet, ethical, but pragmatic. Bring me your operating agreement and corporate bylaws. We'll see what options exist. That meeting was the first step in what would become an intricate 3-month strategy. I executed it meticulously, patiently, never revealing my true motivations to anyone, least of all to Melissa. The first phase involved creating a new entity called Nexus Intellectual Holdings. As the developer of our core algorithms, I had certain rights to the intellectual property that weren't clearly addressed in our hastily drafted original agreement. With Marcus's guidance, I legally transferred ownership of our software's core engine to Nexus, a company solely owned by me. Apex would continue using the software, but now under a licensing agreement that could be modified or revoked. The second phase required more finesse. We had a minor investor, Tanya Lee, who owned 8% of Apex. I approached her with an offer to buy her shares at a significant premium using my personal savings. The transaction gave me 51% ownership, a controlling interest that Melissa never saw coming. The third and most complex phase involved restructuring Apex itself. We split it into 2 entities, Apex Consulting, which would handle client relations and implementation, and Apex Development, focused on creating new products and features. On paper, the restructuring was presented as a tax optimization strategy. In reality, it ensured that Melissa remained a 49% owner of Apex Consulting, which represented only about a quarter of our business's total value, while I controlled the rest. All of this happened right under Melissa's nose. She signed documents without reading the fine print, trusting that I was handling the boring legal stuff, as I always had. Meanwhile, the West Ridge contract negotiation continued, with Melissa and James Carson spending more and more time together in private meetings. The legal framework wasn't the only area where I exercised strategic foresight. I implemented a series of technical safeguards as well. Our proprietary algorithms, the true value behind Apex, were my creation, my intellectual children. I meticulously documented every development milestone with timestamp code repositories, ensuring that if questioned, I could prove my sole authorship of the core technology. I migrated critical development servers to new hosting environments with security protocols only I could access. To the outside world and to Melissa, nothing had changed. But beneath the surface, I was constructing an impenetrable fortress around what mattered most. Throughout this process, a strange sense of calm guided my actions. The emotional devastation of Melissa's betrayal had crystallized into something else entirely. A cold, precise clarity that allowed me to see 3 moves ahead at all times. It reminded me of the state I'd enter when coding complex algorithms, a flow state where emotion receded and pure logic prevailed. The irony wasn't lost on me. Melissa's betrayal had hurt me deeply, yet it had also freed me from emotional constraints that might have otherwise limited my response. I maintained the perfect facade of an oblivious, trusting husband. I came home with flowers, I asked about her day, I even arranged a weekend getaway to Cannon Beach, where we walked along the shoreline and talked about everything except the truth hanging between us like a guillotine blade. The irony wasn't lost on me. While she betrayed our marriage, I was systematically dismantling our business partnership. We were both liars now, both traitors in our own ways. The difference was that her betrayal was driven by passion or boredom or whatever makes someone cheat. Mine was calculated, cold, and completely legal. By the time the Westridge contract was finally signed, a $12 million deal that would indeed transform our company, my preparations were complete. The celebration party at Portland's most exclusive restaurant was a masterclass in acting on both our parts. Melissa played the role of devoted wife and brilliant co-founder, accepting congratulations from employees and clients alike. I played the role of proud husband, raising toasts to my amazing wife, without whom none of this would be possible. James Carson was there too, representing Westridge. He kept a professional distance from Melissa during the formal part of the evening, but I noticed them both disappear around the same time during dessert. When they returned, separately of course, Melissa's lipstick was freshly applied, and Carson's tie was slightly askew. It was almost comical how obvious they were, how secure they felt in their deception. They had no idea what was coming. That night, as we drove home in silence, Melissa finally spoke the words I'd been waiting for. "Donald, we need to talk." I pulled into our driveway, turned off the engine, and faced her with a neutral expression. "About what?" She took a deep breath, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I'm not happy. I haven't been for a while." I waited, saying nothing, forcing her to fill the silence. "You're a good man," she continued, not meeting my eyes. "And what we've built together is incredible. But something's missing for me. I think I need some time apart." "Is there someone else?" I asked quietly, already knowing the answer. Her head snapped up, surprise and guilt flashing across her face. "Why would you ask that?" "Just a question," I replied with a slight shrug. "Is there?" She hesitated, then nodded almost imperceptibly. "Yes, it just happened. I didn't plan it." "James Carson?" Another flash of surprise. "How did you, It doesn't matter," I cut her off. "What matters is what happens now. What do you want, Melissa?" She seemed thrown by my calm reaction, perhaps expecting tears or rage. I think I want to try being with him. See if it's real." I nodded as if we were discussing a minor business decision. "Okay." "Okay?" she echoed incredulously. "That's it? What do you want me to say? That I'll fight for you, beg you to stay?" I looked at her directly, my voice steady. "We're adults. You have made your choice." "What about the company?" she asked, her practical side emerging even in this moment of personal upheaval. "We'll figure it out," I said vaguely, one thing at a time. That night, I slept in the guest room. The next morning, Melissa packed a suitcase, claiming she was going to stay with her friend Jenna to clear her head. I knew she was going straight to James Carson's downtown loft, but I said nothing, just wished her well with the same detached pleasantness I might offer a casual acquaintance. As soon as she left, I called Marcus Gentry and set the final phase of my plan in motion. For the next 3 weeks, I focused entirely on work, expanding Apex's reach and solidifying our new organizational structure. I declined calls from mutual friends wanting to know what was going on with you and Melissa. I avoided the usual social spots where I might be subjected to pitying looks or awkward questions. During this time, I also took a calculated risk by accelerating development on our next-generation platform, something I'd been conceptualizing for months but hadn't yet prioritized. I pulled our best engineers into a skunkworks team, operating out of a separate office space reporting directly to me. The project consumed my days and nights, providing not just a strategic business advantage, but also a welcome distraction from the personal turmoil. There's something therapeutic about complex problem solving. It forces your mind to focus, to operate in a realm where emotional chaos can't reach. Those 3 weeks of intense development produced more innovation than we'd achieved in the previous 6 months. When Melissa finally reached out to discuss our situation, I suggested meeting at a neutral location, a coffee shop in the Pearl District, equidistant from our office and Carson's apartment. She looked different when she arrived. Her hair was shorter, styled in an elegant bob I'd never seen before. Her outfit was more expensive looking than her usual business attire, no doubt Carson's influence. But what struck me most was the confident smile she wore as she approached my table, the smile of someone who thought they were in control of the situation. "Donald," she said, sliding into the chair across from me, "thank you for meeting me. You look well." "So do you," I replied truthfully. "Happiness suits you." She had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable. "Look, I know this is difficult, And I'm sorry for how everything happened, but I think we can handle this maturely. Don't you? Of course, I agreed, sipping my Americano. That's why I'm here. Good. She relaxed visibly. I've been thinking about the company. Obviously, we need to figure out some kind of arrangement. What did you have in mind? I asked, curious to hear what she thought she was entitled to. Well, we built Apex together, she said, leaning forward earnestly. I think the fairest thing would be a clean split, 50-50. I'd step back from day-to-day operations, of course, since that would be awkward, but I'd retain my ownership stake. I nodded thoughtfully, as if considering this entirely reasonable proposal. And what does James think of this arrangement? Her eyes narrowed slightly. This isn't about James. This is about us, our company. Of course, I conceded, but I imagine you've discussed it with him, given that you're living together now. She flushed. How did you... It doesn't matter, I said for the second time. And you're right, this is about our company, which is why I've taken the liberty of preparing some documents. I reached into my briefcase and withdrew a thick folder, sliding it across the table to her. This outlines the current corporate structure of Apex and its related entities, along with a fair market buyout offer for your shares. She frowned, opening the folder and beginning to scan the contents. I watched as confusion, then disbelief, then anger crossed her face in rapid succession. What is this? She demanded, holding up a diagram showing the relationship between Apex Consulting, Apex Development, and Nexus Intellectual Holdings. When did this happen? Over the past few months, I replied calmly. You signed the authorization papers yourself. It was part of our tax optimization strategy, remember? I never authorized splitting the company like this. Actually, you did. Page 14 of the March filing, paragraph 3. Your signature is at the bottom. She frantically flipped through the documents until she found the page in question, staring at her own signature as if it were a forgery. It wasn't. This is, she sputtered, perfectly legal, I finished for her, as is the new ownership structure. As you can see, you retained 49% ownership of Apex Consulting, which manages our client relationships in implementation services. But what about the software, the intellectual property? Her voice rose, drawing glances from nearby tables. That's held by Nexus Intellectual Holdings, which licenses it to both Apex entities. The licensing fees account for approximately 60% of our total revenue stream. And let me guess, she said bitterly, I don't own any part of Nexus. No, I confirmed. As the sole developer of the core algorithms, I established Nexus to protect those specific assets. Again, completely legal under our operating agreement. Her face had gone pale. In Apex Development? I own 100% of that entity, which now employs most of our development team and creates all new products and features. She sat back, the full picture finally coming into focus. You planned this. From the moment you found out about James, you've been planning this. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. I protected what was mine. Half of Apex is mine, she insisted, her voice trembling with rage. We built it together. You can't just restructure everything without my knowledge. But I didn't, I pointed out. You signed every document. You had every opportunity to read them, to question them. You chose not to. Because I trusted you. The irony of her statement hung in the air between us. I let it linger for a moment before responding. Yes, and I trusted you. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. The buyout offer for your shares of Apex Consulting is fair. More than fair, actually. It's based on an independent valuation conducted last month. You'll find the full report in the folder. This is wrong, she whispered, tears forming in her amber eyes. Morally wrong. Perhaps, I acknowledged, but we're well past moral high ground, aren't we? She wiped at her eyes angrily. I'll fight this. I'll get a lawyer. You're welcome to try, I said, gathering my things and standing. But everything was done by the book. You might tie things up in court for a while, but you'll spend a fortune in legal fees with no guarantee of success. And of course, all the details of why our partnership dissolved would become public record. The color drained further from her face as the implications sank in. Her affair with a major client's executive becoming public knowledge would devastate her professional reputation, something she'd always guarded jealously. I hadn't explicitly threatened to expose her, but I didn't need to. She was smart enough to connect the dots. Take some time to think it over, I suggested, my voice softening slightly. Not out of compassion, but because I knew a gentler approach would be more effective now. The offer is generous, Melissa. You could start fresh, build something new. Isn't that what you want? I placed a business card on top of the folder. That's my attorney's contact information. The offer stands for 2 weeks. I suggest you get your own lawyer to review it. Someone good, someone expensive. I turned to leave, then paused, looking back at her tear-streaked face. For what it's worth, I really did love you, Melissa. Every day of our marriage. She didn't respond, just stared at the documents that detailed exactly how thoroughly I'd outplayed her. I walked out of the coffee shop into the bright Portland afternoon, feeling neither triumph nor regret, just a calm certainty that I'd done what needed to be done. Over the next few days, I ignored Melissa's increasingly desperate calls and texts. I knew she'd been consulting with attorneys, expensive ones, based on the names I heard through industry gossip. I also knew what they were telling her, that while what I'd done was ethically questionable, it was legally sound. On the 5th day after our coffee shop meeting, I received an unexpected text from Eric Donovan, a former client who now worked in the same building as Westridge Manufacturing. Thought you should know, just saw Melissa and Carson having a massive argument in the lobby. She was crying, he was yelling something about damaged goods and not what I signed up for. Sorry, man, rough situation all around. I wasn't surprised. James Carson had pursued Melissa at least partly for her status as a successful tech entrepreneur with a valuable company stake. Now that her stake was worth a fraction of what he'd anticipated, I imagined his ardor had cooled considerably. The next morning, Melissa called again. This time I answered. I'll take the buyout, she said without preamble, her voice flat and defeated. I'll have the papers drawn up, I replied. Donald? Her voice softened, a hint of the woman I'd once loved breaking through. Could we meet one more time to sign everything in person? I think we deserved that much at least. I hesitated. Part of me wanted clean closure. No more meetings, no more painful conversations. But another part recognized that 5 years of marriage shouldn't end via courier service. All right, I agreed finally. Where? Bella Notte, she suggested, naming the little Italian restaurant where I'd proposed to her half a decade earlier. 7 o'clock? I'll be there. The restaurant hadn't changed. Same checkered tablecloths, same soft lighting, same scent of garlic and basil in the air. Melissa was already seated at our old table in the corner when I arrived, her eyes fixed on a glass of red wine. She looked up as I approached, and I was struck by how tired she appeared. The confident, polished woman from the coffee shop was gone, replaced by someone who seemed smaller somehow, diminished. You came, she said, a note of relief in her voice. I said I would. I sat across from her, declining the wine list the waiter offered. Just sparkling water for me. I'm driving. We ordered tagliatelle for her, risotto for me, and then sat in awkward silence until the food arrived. I noticed she was no longer wearing her wedding ring. Mine had been off for weeks. I've been staying with Jenna, she said finally, pushing pasta around her plate. Actually staying with her this time, not, I nodded, not particularly interested in the details of her living arrangements. James and I are over, she continued, looking up to gauge my reaction. When I offered none, she pressed on. He changed when he found out about the company situation. Suddenly, he was talking about financial compatibility and how he needed a partner who matched his ambitions. Sounds like a charming guy, I remarked dryly. You really know how to pick them. She flinched but didn't argue. I deserve that. You deserved better than him, I said, surprising myself with the admission. But that was your choice to make. I made a lot of bad choices. She set down her fork, her food barely touched. Do you want to know the stupidest one? I waited, saying nothing. The stupidest choice wasn't starting something with James. It was not talking to you when I started feeling unhappy, not giving our marriage a chance to be fixed. Why didn't you? I asked, genuinely curious. It was the one question that had haunted me through all of this. She shook her head slowly. I don't know, fear, maybe, of confrontation, of finding out that the problem wasn't our marriage but me, or maybe just taking the easy way out. She looked directly at me, her amber eyes swimming with tears. That night when you came home early and I said those awful things to you, don't touch me, Donald. I saw the hurt in your eyes. And instead of stopping right there and telling you the truth, I just kept lying, kept hurting you. I felt a tightness in my chest, not the sharp pain of fresh betrayal, but an echo of it, a ghost of what I'd felt that night. And now I've lost everything, she continued. You, the company, my self-respect. All for what? For a man who only wanted what I could give him, not who I actually was. You haven't lost everything, I said quietly. You're still the same brilliant marketer who helped build Apex from nothing. That talent is yours. No one can take it away. She smiled sadly, always looking for the silver lining. That's what I loved about you. Not optimism, I corrected, realism. You're resilient, Melissa. You always have been. You'll rebuild. We ate in silence for a while, the weight of all that had happened and all that could have been hanging between us. When the check came, she reached for it. Please, she said when I started to object. Let me do this one last thing. I nodded, not arguing. Outside, the night was cold, autumn leaves swirling around our feet as we stood on the sidewalk, neither quite ready for the final goodbye. You know, she said after a long moment, part of me hoped you would confront me that night, that you'd yell and demand explanations, force me to face what I was doing. And instead, I walked away without saying a word, I replied. That was worse, she admitted, much worse, because it showed how deeply I'd hurt you. She reached out hesitantly, touching my cheek with cool fingers, the first physical contact between us in months. I'm sorry, Donald, for everything. I covered her hand with mine briefly, allowing myself one moment of connection before gently removing it. I know, I said simply. Then I stepped back, creating distance between us again. Goodbye, Melissa. I turned and walked away without looking back, her whispered goodbye, Donald, floating after me on the night air. The final papers were signed through our respective attorneys the following week. Melissa took the buyout, a substantial sum that would allow her to start over somewhere new. I heard through mutual connections that she moved to Seattle a month later to start her own marketing consultancy. As for me, I threw myself into expanding Apex. We opened offices in Seattle, San Francisco, and Denver within the year. The Westridge contract led to others, bigger ones, with manufacturers across the western United States. James Carson, I learned, was fired from Westridge after an internal audit revealed questionable financial practices. Apparently, I wasn't the only one he'd tried to swindle. The fallout from Carson's dismissal was swift and devastating. The audit had uncovered a pattern of kickbacks from vendors, inflated expense reports, and most damning of all, evidence that he had been planning to leave Westridge and take key clients with him to start his own competing firm. The industry circles in Portland aren't large. Word spread quickly. His reputation in tatters, Carson found himself essentially unemployable in the Pacific Northwest. Last I heard, he'd taken a much lower-level position with a struggling company in Arizona, a humiliating step down for someone who'd once moved through executive suites with such confidence. I took no pleasure in his downfall. It felt less like justice and more like the natural consequence of character flaws that would have eventually caught up with him regardless. The man who had so casually invaded my marriage had destroyed himself through his own greed and hubris. There was a certain symmetry to it. I sold our West Hills house, too many memories, and bought a sleek penthouse overlooking the Willamette River. I traveled more, first for business, then simply for pleasure. I visited places Melissa and I had talked about going someday, but never found the time for. One unremarkable Tuesday, a year after our divorce was finalized, I received a plain envelope with no return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping from the Seattle Business Journal, a profile of the region's top entrepreneurs. My photo was prominently featured alongside a headline, "From Algorithm to Empire, Donald Wright's Apex Solutions reshapes manufacturing logistics." In the margin, written in familiar handwriting, was a simple note. You deserve this. Sorry for everything. M. I looked at it for a long time, then carefully folded it and placed it in my desk drawer. Not displayed, not discarded, just another artifact from a closed chapter. That evening, I stood on my penthouse balcony, watching the city lights shimmer on the dark river below. I thought about choices and consequences, about the paths we take and the ones we abandon. She had said, "Don't touch me, Donald." I had left without saying a word, and now she regretted everything. But the truth is, regret is part of the human condition. We all carry it in some form, for words spoken in anger, for love not protected, for opportunities not seized. I raised my whiskey glass in a silent toast to the glittering city. To moving forward, I whispered to the night air, to never looking back. But even as I spoke the words, some part of me knew they weren't entirely true. Because some memories, both sweet and bitter, stay with us forever. They shape us, change us, define who we become. And perhaps that's the true irony of life. Sometimes what you regret most isn't what you lost, but what you gained in its place. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with another text from Melissa. "I'm in Portland for a conference next week. Coffee? Just to catch up. No agenda." I stared at the message for a long time before finally typing a response. "Sorry, too busy." It was a lie, of course, I wasn't too busy. But some doors, once closed, should stay that way. Some wounds, even healed, shouldn't be reopened. She texted back almost immediately. "I understand. Take care of yourself, Donald." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. That night, I dreamed of her for the first time in months. Not Melissa as she was at the end, tearful and regretful in that Italian restaurant, but Melissa as she was in the beginning, laughing as we unpacked boxes in our first tiny office, triumphant as we landed our first major client, radiant as she walked toward me on our wedding day. I woke before dawn, the ghost of her smile still lingering in my mind. For a moment, just a moment, I allowed myself to wonder what might have happened if she had spoken up about her unhappiness, if I had noticed the signs earlier, if we had fought for what we built together instead of against each other. But maybes and what ifs are fool's games. Reality is what happened, not what might have been. I got up, made coffee, and sat at my computer to review the latest expansion plans for Apex. By the time the sun rose over Mount Hood, casting golden light across the city, I was fully immersed in work, the dream fading like morning mist. Life moves forward, even when parts of us remain tethered to the past. That's the paradox of loss. It never completely leaves you, but you learn to carry it differently as time passes. Less like an open wound, more like a scar that occasionally aches when the weather changes. 6 months later, I was in Seattle for a technology conference when I saw her. I was crossing the hotel lobby toward the elevator when I glimpsed a familiar profile at the hotel bar, chestnut hair now grown out again, elegant posture I would recognize anywhere. I could have slipped away unnoticed. Should have, probably. Instead, I found myself walking toward her. "Melissa." She turned, surprise flickering across her face before settling into a cautious smile. "Donald, I heard you might be here." "Industry gossip travels fast," I remarked, gesturing to the empty stool beside her. "Mind if I join you?" She hesitated for only a second. "Please." I sat, ordering a Macallan neat from the bartender. Up close, she looked good, healthy, rested, her amber eyes clear and bright. She wore a simple black dress that I didn't recognize, a thin gold necklace at her throat. "How's your conference going?" she asked, sipping what looked like a gin and tonic. "The usual. Lots of talk about AI and machine learning revolutionizing everything. Some of it might even be true." I shrugged. "You're not attending?" "No, I'm here for a client meeting. My firm is handling the rebranding for a local tech startup." She smiled slightly. "Apparently, I've developed a reputation for making complex technical concepts understandable to normal humans." "You always had that gift," I acknowledged. "How is the new company going?" "Growing. We're up to 12 people now, specializing in tech and biotech marketing." She turned her glass slowly. "Nothing on the scale of Apex, but it's mine, built from scratch." "Congratulations." "Thank you." She glanced at me. "An Apex, though I hardly need to ask. I see the articles. You're everywhere these days." Expansion continues. We're moving into the Midwest next quarter. I always knew you'd do amazing things, she said softly. Even without me. The statement hung between us, laden with unspoken meanings. I took a sip of my scotch, letting the burn distract me from the sudden tightness in my chest. We both moved on, I said finally. Built new lives. Yes, she looked down at her drink, though some things are harder to rebuild than others. I knew she wasn't talking about business. We sat in surprisingly comfortable silence for a moment, the ambient noise of the hotel bar washing over us. Then she straightened as if coming to a decision. I never properly apologized to you, Donald. Not really. I said I was sorry, but I never truly acknowledged the depth of what I did. You don't need to. I do, she interrupted firmly. I betrayed you, not just as a wife, but as a partner in every sense of the word. We built something extraordinary together, and I risked it all for nothing, for a fleeting feeling that wasn't even real. I studied her face, searching for the manipulation I might once have suspected. I found only sincerity. What do you want from me, Melissa? Forgiveness? Absolution? She shook her head. No, I don't expect either. I just want you to know that I understand now what I threw away, and that I've learned from it. Painful lessons, but necessary ones. Well, I said after a moment, and we all make mistakes. Some bigger than others. She smiled wryly. True. I finished my scotch and signaled for the check. I should get going. Early presentation tomorrow. She nodded, a flash of disappointment crossing her face. Of course. I paid for both our drinks, despite her protests, then stood to leave. It was good seeing you, Melissa. I mean that. You too. She looked up at me, her expression open and unguarded. Maybe next time you're in Saddle, or I'm in Portland. I knew what she was asking, and I also knew my answer wouldn't be what she hoped for. I don't think that would be a good idea, I said gently. Some chapters are better left closed. She absorbed this with remarkable composure, only a slight tightening of her fingers around her glass betraying her disappointment. I understand. Take care of yourself, Donald. You too. I walked away, feeling her eyes on my back as I crossed the lobby toward the elevators. I didn't look back. Some goodbyes are best left final. That night in my hotel room overlooking Elliott Bay, I thought about second chances and whether some betrayals cut too deep to ever be truly forgiven. I thought about the woman I'd once loved with all my heart, sitting alone at that bar with her regrets and her new beginning. I didn't call her, didn't text. Some doors should remain closed, even when part of you wonders what lies on the other side. The next morning, as I prepared for my presentation, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown Seattle number. You were right. Some chapters should stay closed, but I'm glad we had one final paragraph. Wishing you continued success and happiness. You deserve both. Miham, I read it twice, then deleted it without responding. Not out of anger or bitterness, but because there was nothing left to say. We had both said our pieces, written our endings to the story we once shared. She had said, "Don't touch me, Donald." I had left without saying a word, and yes, perhaps now she regretted everything. But life isn't about avoiding regrets. It's about learning from them, growing from them, becoming stronger in the broken places. As I stood before a room of industry leaders later that morning, confidently presenting Apex's vision for the future of supply chain management, I realized something important. Sometimes losing what you thought you wanted leads you exactly where you need to be. I had built something lasting, something meaningful, something entirely mine. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. That's the thing about betrayal. It either breaks you or forges you into something stronger. I chose the latter, and looking back now, I wouldn't change a thing. Not even those 5 cold words that changed everything.